Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. So very good afternoon. This is my great privilege to welcome you all to this national webinar on open access publishing. I would particularly like to welcome our distinguished speakers, Dr. Rebecca Lawrence, Managing Director of 1000 Research Limited, Terran Francis Company, Mr. Jack McDonald, Director of Library Sales, Cambridge University Press, and Mr. Amir Kahana, Account Manager, Asia for Knowledge Unleashed. I would particularly extend my warm welcome to Professor Rajkumar, our Honorable Vice Chancellor of Jindal Global University, for gracing the occasion and for agreeing to be here to give his opening remarks. As you might know, Jindal Global University has been recognized as Institution of Excellence by Ministry of Education. Is the top-ranked private university in India as per recent QS ranking. We are amongst top 700 universities globally and among top 150 young universities less than 50 years old globally. JGU is a research-oriented university, and our faculty and students have published over 1,200 research papers in peer-reviewed journals, apart from over 2,000 articles in newspapers, magazines, etc. And of course, open access publishing is of great interest to us. Talking about open access, the knowledge and discovery is in that at the sense of open access, and any barriers like paywalls, etc., are only aberrance to free access to the knowledge. Internet has made it possible now to fully realize that aim to make the knowledge accessible freely to everyone. Open access publishing has gained momentum recently. After 2013 Berlin Declaration, many innovative initiatives have taken place. Also, mainstream commercial publishers, have started their own open access publishing programs. So this purpose of this webinar is to learn about the benefits of open access publishing and remove some of the perceptions or concerns attached to open access, regarding quality or ability to be cited. And our distinguished speakers will present 3 different models of open access publishing during this webinar. And hopefully that will help us formulating requisite strategy and institutional policies to promote open access publishing in our institutions. With this, I would like to invite Professor Rajkumar to present his views on the subjects. Professor Rajkumar.
Right. Well, very good afternoon to you, and welcome to this very important initiative that has been promoted in collaboration with a number of organizations. I would like to first of all recognize the collaborative endeavor of the Consortium of Private Academic Libraries in India, COPAL, of course, our own global library at Jindal Global University. It's also my proud privilege to welcome Dr. Rebecca Lawrence, the Managing Director of F1000 Research Limited, Mr. Jack McDonald, Director of the Library Sales of Cambridge University Press, and Mr. Amir Kahana, Account Manager Asia of the Knowledge Unmatched in Germany. This initiative, in the form of the national webinar on open access publishing, couldn't have been organized at a more important time. Of course, the appetite for all of us to be able to consume information and resources through online access has significantly increased in the post-corona world, or rather during the corona world. But no doubt about the fact that one of the most difficult issues that the academic world has been facing is with regard to the challenges posed by the entire framework of open access, but also the responsibilities involved in democratizing research and knowledge for people who simply may not have access as well. So this entire evolution of open access has been part of a very old and even historical movement. A lot of initiatives have come in this evolution. One can talk about the Budapest Open Access Initiative, the Bethesda Statement on Open Access Publishing, of course, culminating in the Berlin Declaration on Open Access Knowledge in the Sciences and Humanities in 2003. All this has been part of the global initiatives and efforts with the focus on democratizing access to knowledge and in many ways not limiting that access through any other means. In some ways, open access creates opportunities for people to be able to access that in any forms and manifestations. Of course, the issue of open access has been discussed and debated within India. In 2004, the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, Chennai, led an initiative for open access movement. Also in 2009, we had the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, also developing some understanding and requiring many of its research grantees to provide open access to the funded research. We also have the Delhi Declaration on Open Access in South Asia, which was issued in as late as 14 February 2018. And so this has been part of a collective imagination of intellectual consciousness, not only among academic communities, but also between policy and regulatory bodies, as well as higher education leaders in different parts of the world. It's also important for us to recognize that the heart of open access is also about to what extent academic research emerging particularly out of institutions, universities which are not for profit in nature, to what extent that should be made available and accessible for the larger benefit of humanity and society, but also most importantly for fulfilling the goals of university in the pursuit of common good. The heart of what a university does, an institution does, is in relation to creating knowledge, but also making that knowledge available for the wider public at large. The public interest and the pursuit of common good are fundamental values that universities and academic institutions are steadfastly committed to. And there is no more important issue than open access when it comes to how we can make the research that gets generated available for a wider number of people to access it and to use it. It's also equally important for us to recognize the challenges surrounding it. One of the major challenges is also about to what extent the publishing houses and the publishing industry is going to manage its own resources. The political economy of the publishing industry is going to be impacted when it comes to providing open access, and how a reasonable, a more acceptable framework is created so that we continue to invest in the entrepreneurship and agency of publishing industry and publishing houses, and yet we are able to strike a very important balance when it comes to providing access to knowledge and resources. It's one of the challenging aspects of open access, and I think a lot has been talked about it, and probably this webinar will provide some insights as to what open access is all about and how libraries and universities can act in a responsible manner, in an ethical manner, in a reasonable manner, so that access to knowledge and resources is indeed available to people who would like to have, yet the proprietary content that is associated with in the publishing industry and the associated contractual obligations and other types of restrictions are duly respected as well. And so this is an important issue that we need to address. And I do believe that with the presence of a distinguished group of people who have spent good part of their life pursuing this organizationally and individually, it'll be a useful starting point for us to think about, how we move forward. I want to end by recalling an amazing book written by a Harvard moral philosopher by name Michael Sandel. A few years ago, Michael's book was entitled "What Money Can't Buy: The Moral Limits of Markets." And in that book, Michael talks about a world in which we should be conscious of moving into that world in which everything that we do is measured in monetary terms. And Michael differentiates a market economy from a market society, and he endorses the idea of a market economy, but not a market society, in which everything that we do is measured in monetary terms. And the consequence of such a society that we are increasingly moving into, he argues, is of twofold: essentially widespread inequalities and institutionalized forms of corruption, both results as a consequence of a market society in which everything that we do is measured in monetary terms. This is indeed a wake-up call for publishing houses, wake-up call for IP enthusiasts, wake-up call for institutions to strike a unique balance when it comes to democratizing access to knowledge and resources. And also, it's also a wake-up call for citizens in general and students and faculty members and others of a university community, so that the access that is being given through this forms of open access models is also acted responsibly. So in some ways, all of us have to contribute our own bit to make sure that the vision of the Open Access Initiative is not only implementable, but also is sustainable in the long run. And that's the very important balance that we need to strike. With those words, it is indeed my proud privilege to be part of this initiative. And I would like to particularly thank the director of the Global Library at OP Jindal Global University, Mr. Buddhi Prakash Chauhan, and his other colleagues for taking the initiative to conduct this webinar. I sincerely hope that more and more people become familiar with the issues surrounding open access, and we have debates and discussions and more deeper understanding as to what constitutes open access, but also how we can achieve it with the right kind of balance that is needed when it comes to providing access to knowledge and resources. Thank you. Buddhi, you need to unmute yourself, Buddhi.
Thank you, Professor Rajkumar, for your valuable and thoughtful insights for a sustainable open access model that we all should strive for. Thank you so much for your presence and gracing this occasion. We will now move on to the session and the presentation by our distinguished speakers. We will have 3 presentations, in fact 4. Dr. Rebecca Lawrence will make 2 presentations, one on general open access history and policy and the benefits and other things, and followed by a presentation on our platform F1000 research. So I would like to invite Professor Dr. Rebecca Lawrence for her presentation. Dr. Lawrence is Managing Director of F1000 Research Limited. She was a member of the European Commission's Open Science Policy Platform, chairing their work on next generation indicators and their integrated advice, OSPP REC, and is a member of the US National Academy's NASIM Committee on Advanced and Automated Workflows. She has been co-chair of many working groups on data and peer review, including for Research Data Alliance and ORCID, and is an advisory board member of for DORA, San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment. She has worked on STM publishing for over 20 years and is an associate of the Royal College of Music and holds a PhD in pharmacology. Please welcome Dr. Rebecca Lawrence for her presentation. Dr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Mr. Buddy Prakash Chauhan for a very kind invitation to talk to you today, and thank you for Professor Rajkumar for a great introduction to what we're trying to all work together to achieve with open access, and indeed also open research, which is something that I also would like to talk to you about today. So I'm just going to share my presentation. Get it on full screen. Okay. So as just introduced, I'm going to talk about two different parts to my presentation. But overall, I want to talk about open access and open research, and about how we can transform scholarly publishing, how it's already starting to transform, but also how I think we can potentially transform it further for the benefit of the scholarly research community, and indeed for the benefit of society more broadly. Just to introduce who we are, so we were actually originally founded by somebody called Vitek Traj, and he was really one of the father figures actually of open access publishing. So he launched the Biomed Central journals, and they were really some of the first fully open access publications. F1000 Research itself launched in 2013 and is of course open access, but it's also open research publishing, and I'll explain the distinction in a bit. The aim really of what we've been trying to do is really to try and rethink and evolve scholarly communication system, and we're working with many partners such as funding agencies, academies, institutions, societies and others to really try and think how to do that. And back at the beginning of this year, we were acquired by Taylor & Francis, who are one of the large scholarly publishing organisations. So what I plan to cover, the first part will look at both open access but also at open research, looking at the growth of open access, and then really what open research is about, looking at the landscape, looking at the policies and looking at the challenges and maybe how we can overcome some of those, and also sort of general direction. And then the second half of my talk will be about the open research publishing system and how we can potentially transform scholarly communication, and some of the partnerships that we've developed with
Rebecca, can you make it a presentation mode? I think this is in general mode, your presentation, full screen. Yeah.
I think I'm showing the wrong screen. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's great now.
Perfect. Apologies. Okay, so starting looking with open access. So I just thought I'd start with a definition so that we're all talking about the same thing here. So there are two core elements to open access. The first is about making the content openly available online to read. So this means that anybody, anywhere, as long as of course you've got internet access, can read that content. The second part of it is about making that content reusable by others with minimal restrictions. Now there's a lot of different licenses with slightly different elements within them, but these are the broad principles that sit behind all of those licenses. As you just heard from the introduction, there's actually a whole raft of different declarations and statements. There's the Berlin Declaration back in 2003, which was really one of those initial milestones of open access. But subsequently, there have been a number of different statements on really trying to move the open access initiative forward and ensuring that really there is true access to research, and that particularly where it's been funded using public money, but also ideally more broadly, the world has access to those outlets. There are many different types of open access, and I'm not going to go through them all, and I know the other speakers will be talking about some other variations, which I haven't touched on so much here because of that. But there are probably two broad areas that are talked about the most, which I just wanted to clarify so that we all understand those two core elements. The first is around what's called green open access. And this is, if you look at the flow diagram at the bottom, basically there are three versions of an article. There's the author's original manuscript, which is what you send in on submission. There's then the author's accepted manuscript, which is following peer review and revision, etc. It's the version of the manuscript that the journal or publication has agreed to publish. And then there's what's called the version of record, and that's after copy editing and typesetting and tagging, etc. It's that final version of that article. And essentially, green open access is typically where the publication is in a subscription journal, and therefore the cost of the payment for the work done involved in creating the version of record is covered by the journal subscription. But where you deposit an earlier version of the article, which is the author accepted manuscript. And typically it's an open access repository, and there's, many universities have these, but also there's some national ones and international ones depending on subjects, etc. And there's typically often an embargo period there. And so one of the challenges with this is that obviously, with an embargo period, it means that unless you have a subscription, you can't access that content until you've waited the embargo, which is typically 6 months. It can be 12 months. It can be longer. It depends on the discipline. And so there's currently a real push to try and remove that embargo period. And of course, the challenge there is around actually where the cost of covering the costs essentially of publication therefore sit if you completely remove the embargo period in this particular model. So just so it's clear, which is what versions, the author accepted manuscript is essentially will look a bit like the version on the left, which is looks like the version that you submitted and following revision, whereas the version of record is the laid out typeset version that's often been copy edited, etc. The other major version of open access is gold open access, and this is where the version of record is made openly and freely available online. And one of the more common approaches to cover then the cost of the whole process of from initial submission to publication is through the payment of article publishing charges. And these can be paid sometimes from the author, sometimes via their grant. They can be paid directly from the institution. They can be paid directly by the funder, which sometimes is called diamond open access. But there's various different models here. One of the challenges with gold open access is while everybody has access to the full version of record and has immediate access, there is a challenge in terms of those communities that don't necessarily have the funding to be able to pay those article publishing charges. And so there is a challenge around equity of access and to be able to both access but also to be able to contribute and to be able to publish through this model. And so we and many other publishers, and PLOS is taking the lead, and there are many others, and indeed the other speakers that we have today are doing a lot of work around this, is to try and look at how can we address this and redress this balance so that in those subject areas and in those communities where there isn't that funding, you can still publish open access. Now, one of the major policy changes that has happened, particularly in Europe, but it also includes funders in other areas of the world as well, is through a group called Coalition S. And you can see there the group of funders that are part of that coalition. And they put together something called Plan S, which is trying to make full and immediate open access a reality. And what they are asking for is that with effect from the beginning of next year, all scholarly publications on the results from research funded by public or private grants provided by national, regional and international research councils and funding bodies must be published in open access journals, on open access platforms, or made immediately available through open access repositories without embargo. And so there are a lot of discussions at the moment particularly with publishers in trying to understand how to convert particularly subscription publications and those that may currently support some open access articles within the subscription journal, how to transform and sometimes to flip their journals towards open access. And sometimes this is easier and sometimes this is harder, particularly in the more sort of social sciences and humanities where that funding often isn't available. And so there are a lot of transformative deals being developed between publishers and institutions to try and look at solutions to achieve this. You can see here there's very significant growth in open access even prior to Plan S. So the graph on the left shows a summary across all disciplines and all members of the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association, which is sort of one of the key bodies, publishing bodies. The yellow line is the total across all the different open access licenses, and shows that very significant growth in the number of articles that are now open access. It's still actually, there's still a long way to go in terms of as a proportion of the total publications, but it's certainly increasing significantly. And you can see from a specific publisher's point of view, so from Taylor and Francis, you can see again there's that significant growth being seen there. But the hope is that with Plan S, that will really help to tip the balance and really push towards ultimately trying to transform the vast majority of content to being open access. And I wanted to talk about open research because I think open access is crucial for many reasons which have already been discussed earlier, but I think open research is even more crucial if we really want to maximize the benefits of scholarly research, both for the research community more broadly, but indeed for society. I think open research actually is crucial, and we need to look beyond just open access. So the question is obviously, what is open research? Well, open science or open scholarship, it's got various different terms that can be used interchangeably. But really what it's aiming to do is to increase research quality, to boost collaboration, speed up the research process, make the assessment of research more transparent, promote public access to scientific results, so that's the open access element, as well as introducing more people to academic research. So what does that actually mean? What do those different elements mean? So increasing research quality is really about trying to increase and improve research integrity, trying to make research findings much more reproducible, because there have been significant challenges around particular disciplines, especially in terms of the reproducibility of much of what's being published, and also to improve validation of those research outputs. Boosting collaboration is, both obviously about trying to encourage more collaboration, but it's also about ensuring that research outputs are much easier to use and to reuse. So data, for example, and software, materials and other elements are made available in a way that others can understand and can use and reuse those research outputs. Speeding up the research process is crucial. There are very significant delays, and particularly in the publication process, between when somebody submits an article and others get to benefit from it, and this really slows down the whole research process. And, you know, as we've seen with COVID-19 and research on there, it's crucial to get those findings out much more rapidly to enable people to start to build on those findings. It's also crucial to get a much broader range of outputs out beyond traditional research articles, and to think about other types of research outputs, you know, other types of articles, for example, null and negative results, incremental findings, reproducibility, reproducible findings, all sorts of different types that often aren't published, but also other types of outputs like data and like software and other elements. It's also crucial in terms of making the assessment of research more transparent to ensure both fairness but also accountability, and ultimately, very importantly in today's world, trust, so that you can see how much something has been assessed and by whom, and see what the output of that assessment was. There's promoting public access to scientific results, as we've talked about with open access, which is about, you know, visibility and accessibility and indeed equitability, and then ultimately introducing more people to academic research. So that goes back to the point about trust and about having public trust in the research that we do. Obviously in enabling access beyond simply the research academy, and also in having public engagement in that research, so that we get input into what research we're doing, what areas we're looking at, and into what's being discovered at the end of it. So looking at what is open science, you can see in the middle, in the green, is open access as one of the elements of this, but I think, you know, there are other core elements to open science that are crucial here. There's open data, there's open peer review, open notebooks, there's open source, scientific social networks, there's open educational resources, and as citizen science, as I just talked about. And these are all core pillars that sit behind open science. Now, there's been a really big global shift towards open science. I think Europe particularly has probably been one of the leaders in that shift. So back in 2016, there was the Amsterdam Call for Action on Open Science. And indeed, for the previous 4 years of Commission, the vision for Europe was very much open innovation, open science, open to the world. And there's been a very big drive over those last 4 years to really push the open science agenda. Part of that has included the Fair Data initiative, which is about making the data associated with research findings findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And there are various initiatives. So I've pulled out the African Open Science Platform, but there are many others as well that have been looking at developing policies to support open science. So the African platform has been looking at developing open data policies across Africa and supporting nations in developing those policies and thinking about the particular context in Africa of what open data means and some of the challenges around open data, and more broadly around open access and other elements of open science as well. But you'll see from these examples that I've just put up just now that really open science is becoming very high on the agenda globally, and, you know, with some of the really major organizations around the world. So just this year we have, you know, UNESCO, we have the United Nations, we have the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, we have OECD, and indeed we have many others too, who have been launching consultations, developing recommendations, and thinking about how can we move much more towards open science. I pulled out the OECD example I've shown there specifically because actually I think COVID-19 has been, you know, very useful in demonstrating the value and impact that open science can bring by having much more rapid sharing of outputs, having much more collaboration, having, you know, much more open data has enabled us to look at developing solutions to tackling COVID-19 far faster than we've ever managed before. And I guess the question there is, you know, why should that only happen when we're in an emergency situation. It's perfectly possible for us to do it in other disciplines and other fields. And indeed, it's just as important in cancer, or it's just as important in social sciences, or, all disciplines should benefit from this. And so I think it would be a real shame if we don't use the experience that we've learnt from COVID-19 to really rethink how the scholarly communication and scholarly ecosystem more broadly works. I mentioned about Europe, I think, being particularly leading on open science, and actually part of what they've done is also develop national open science plans. So the level of specific countries, so Finland, for example, or the Netherlands, Ireland, France, and others, actually have developed plans at the national level and have coordination at the national level, because the challenge to move towards open science really needs the different stakeholders to come together and work together. It's very hard for one individual stakeholder, so for the funders, let's say, to do something on their own without the institutions also changing their policies and their practices, and equally the publishers and the societies, etc. So it needs that national coordination, looking in the context of that country, to bring those groups together and really think about how to transition. So in October last year, there was the launch of the Council for National Open Science Coordination, called CONOSC, and really the aim there was also to try and help fill some of the gaps across the member states in Europe, to develop more national open science coordinators and coordination plans, because many nations actually it is more challenging, and there's questions to how to develop those plans. And so a lot of this is about also providing guidance for those that have already developed the plans to think about how to do that, and also to try and encourage it beyond Europe and try and encourage dialogue with other international partners. Now, there are some key barriers to uptake of open science, and some of the main ones I wanted to highlight here, and I would say probably the largest barrier to open science, and indeed open access to some extent as well, is a lack of incentives. The challenge is that in vast majority of cases, most researchers and research, and indeed universities, are judged by the number of publications in either in high impact factor journals or looking at journal brands and the venue of publication as a sort of metric to equate to high quality research outputs. And I won't go into a lot of the background as to why that's problematic, but there are a lot of very well established reasons why that causes a number of problems, and isn't a very good way of assessing outputs. And until that changes, it's actually very difficult to encourage researchers to work in a more open research way and share other types of outputs that maybe won't get a lot of citations or won't get into these sort of big brand publications, but are really important to science and to the progress of science to get out there and to communicate. There's also an element researchers often just don't know how to do it. They don't know how to make their data shareable and findable, or how to get their code or materials out there. So there's a whole education piece there. I think there's also a misconception that open research, and in fact there's a misconception also that open access doesn't equate to quality. That somehow it's a lower quality, it's not the same. And I think it's crucial that we overturn that. The whole point about open access is about access. It's not about quality of the outputs. And the whole point of open research actually is to increase the quality, and to make it really much more transparent, and much more reproducible and much more transparently validated, and therefore increase the quality. And so it's really important, I think, that we ensure that people understand that open research and open access and quality can and must go together. There's also, I think, a sense of conservatism at more senior levels. And we see this all over the place. We see a lot of early career researchers really on board with the idea of being, much more openness and transparency and open science. Some of the more senior levels who have obviously, built a career through the more traditional system are often, not always, but are often more conservative. And of course, they are in the positions to make the decisions on what the policies are. And so I think this is something that we need to look at. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we need to change the system at all levels. So that includes even where, institutions are being judged and assessed for how much funding they get based on the number of high-profile publications that they have. We need to change those kind of league tables. We need to change it at the political level to understanding why open science is so important to really tackle the major challenges that the world is facing at the moment. And it's such a crucial element to that. So how might we overcome those barriers? Well, the first is around developing supportive policies, of course. And as I showed, there are a number of these policies appearing, as many more that are needed. I think it's going to be really important that as much as we can, we maximise consistency between organisations and stakeholders and their policies, and minimise the confusion and complexity, which is often what happens here, because research is very collaborative and it's very international, and researchers often get caught in the middle of having different collaborators being under very different competing sometimes policies, and makes it very difficult for them to actually adhere to those different policies. We also need tools and infrastructures that actually support researchers in being able to work in an open research way. And crucial to that is making sure that we really think about metadata that's underpinning it and interoperability between those infrastructures, so that we can maximise the reporting that comes out of all of it, but minimise the duplication of effort of researchers of having to enter the same information again and again in different places, which is a big hindrance to researchers in really taking this up. We need to make it easy for them, and we need to make sure the tools are there to support them. And then what we need to do is train researchers at all levels, both the early career researchers, but also the more senior researchers, to understand the benefit of open science and the different elements of it, and not only how to do it, but also why is this important, and also then to rethink, as I say, the most crucial bit, I think, is rethinking the rewards and incentives side of things, and how researchers and how institutions are evaluated. And on that point, there are a number of initiatives that are being developed now. There's a registry, an open science registry we're developing as part of the European Commission's Open Science Policy Platform. We're developing it with the Research Data Alliance and others to try and capture best practices around the world around using responsible metrics and a much more holistic assessment of research more broadly. One of the major organisations is DORA, the San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment, which is really trying to look and encourage people to change how research is assessed. There are 2,000 organisational signatories on that already from all around the world, 16,000 individual signatories, and they are collecting also some examples of good practice. I encourage you to have a look, to sign it if you haven't already, and to have a look at some of those examples that are on there. There are also tools to help with thinking about researcher assessment. I won't go through this slide in detail, but there's something called the Open Science Career Assessment Matrix, which looks at trying to assess a researcher's outputs beyond simply articles, but thinking about other types of outputs that they might produce and other types of activities that they may do, which are crucial to being a scholar and contributing to the scholarly ecosystem, but that often aren't really recognised fully. There are also tools to look at different contributions that an author makes onto an article, so that you can really capture, even if you're some of the middle authors in an article, you can capture actually your important contribution, which might be data curation, for example, but it's a crucial element, and to make sure you get the proper recognition for that. And then there are a whole host of infrastructure and metadata elements that are really changing how we share, discover, and talk about research. So there's a whole suite of preprint servers that are developing. Obviously, archive was one of the first, but now there's many across different disciplines. There's a whole raft of different publication models, of which I will talk in a minute about the models that we've been developing, but there's all sorts of different approaches to try and support open science. There are metadata tools to capture citation around data or articles or other artifacts, or indeed the ORCID ID, which is that green ID, which is author identification ID, so you have a unique identifier. There are major initiatives and platforms and infrastructures, I should say, to capture data and provide unique identifiers for that, so you can cite it and get credit for it. There are tools to look at other elements of software and methods and resources and peer review activity. There are tools to help really analyze the vast amount of research that's out there and look at it in a network analysis approach to really identify outputs in there. There are tools to think about alternative approaches to open access and to the funding of open access. You'll obviously hear more about Knowledge Unlatched shortly. And then there are other tools in terms of thinking about actually the conversation and how we talk about research and how we discuss it with others. So there are many major infrastructures. One I wanted to flag was the European Open Science Cloud, EOSC, and there are others around the world developing, which, as I say, it's vitally important that we have these infrastructures that really support policy and that we have interoperability between those infrastructures. And so this Open Science Cloud is about capturing and federating basically research data infrastructures and providing other support tools to help and analyze and store data, etc. There's also another major initiative at the EC level, which is a publishing initiative called Open Research Europe, which is for Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe beneficiaries. It's a publishing platform that will launch at the beginning of next year, and that we have been selected as the provider to provide both the infrastructure and the editorial service that sits behind that to really support those grantees in being able to publish in an open research way. And so what I'll now move on to is talking about how we might transform the scholarly communication system and the publishing element of that, and how we might address some of those challenges that I talked about, and what we've been doing as F1000 to achieve that, and indeed that will sit behind that Open Research Europe platform. So we, as a publisher, have been very lucky to be in quite a unique position to be able to start with a clean slate and say, with the technology we have today, how can we develop a publishing mechanism that really meets the needs of the scholarly system. And so there were 5 areas we wanted to tackle. The first, obviously, about access and reuse and open access. The second, which I also touched on, was about ensuring rapid access to new knowledge, and that we don't have a delay, and we share new knowledge as quickly as we can. The third is about minimizing both reporting and publication bias, and ensuring that we can communicate these other types of outputs that I talked about, and also we can reduce research waste, because there's a lot of evidence a huge amount of research is done that is never shared. That's good quality research, and that's a huge waste of funding and of time, and really slows down progress. The fourth aspect is about supporting verification and reuse, and ensuring that the data underpinned findings are indeed made fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. The fifth is around transparency, fairness, and accountability of reviewers. And then the last one is really trying to support a more holistic research evaluation system, so you judge the research on its intrinsic value and not on its venue of publication. And so we've developed a model that really tries to take the benefits of preprints which is being able to share research very quickly and being able to share all sorts of types of outputs, irrespective of its perceived importance or impact. And combining that with the key benefits of the more traditional journal around validation and peer review, around archiving and indexing. And so the way the model works is that as an author, you submit your article. You can submit a very broad range of article types, so we're very keen to enable you to submit whatever makes the most sense for the finding that you have. And then we have a team internally that do a set of rigorous objective checks. And they look at the author's credentials, they make sure the work's not plagiarized. We also make sure it meets ethical requirements, particularly important in both health research, but also in quite a lot of social sciences as well, looking at consent and institutional review board checks and those kind of things. Where there are reporting guidelines that are sort of standards in the community, we ensure that the methods meet those minimum reporting guidelines for that field. And then we do a lot of work supporting authors to ensure that the data indeed is available and is stored appropriately. And we provide a lot of guidance and support to enable researchers to do this. And so we reject probably about 40%, I would say, of submissions through these checks. But the idea here is that they're very objective checks. So once an article passes those checks, it's formally published. So it gets a citation, and it's fully open access. And it's important to note that this is not a preprint at this stage, because you have now published it as if this is essentially your journal publication. And that point of publication triggers formal invited peer review. So just like on any traditional journal, we invite experts to peer review the article. The key difference is that it's completely open and transparent. So as the reviews come in, we publish them alongside the article with the name of the reviewer or reviewers. And we then go back to the authors, because there are no editors in this model. It's an author-driven model. So we go back to the authors and ask them what they'd like to do next. And what they usually do is respond to the reviewers with comments and discussion. And then they often will publish a new version of that article. We go back to the reviewers to check if this addresses their concerns, and that process continues until the author is happy. And we've agreed with major bibliographic indexes like PubMed and Medline and Scopus and others, the level of peer review, positive peer review, that we need to have achieved on the article for that article to then be indexed in those databases. So it's probably easier to see what I mean when actually looking at an article. So this is an example of an article that's just been published, and you can see there's always this open peer review box, and it will say awaiting peer review. And you can see in the article title it says version 1, peer review, awaiting peer review. So you can cite the article, but it's very clear to everybody that reads it that this hasn't yet been peer reviewed. This is an example of an article that has gone through peer review, and you can see exactly who the reviewers are on the bottom right. You can see there's actually been 2 versions of this article. The first version, 2 of the reviewers had some concerns, and so then the authors did a second version, and those 2 reviewers are now happy. And so there's 4 reviewers now that are happy with the version of the article. And again, you can see in the article title, it's updated with the version number and the peer review status. And then if you click through to view the reports, of course, again, you can see who the reviewers are. You can see what they say and their detailed comments. The peer review reports are independently citable in their own right. And we also track views on them. And then you can view the author response, which is often quite detailed. And we ask authors to also provide a short summary of the changes they've made between versions, so you don't have to read the whole version. And this really gives visibility and credit to reviewers for co-reviewing. So we often find reviewers do co-review with earlier career researchers. They're often associated with their ORCID ID, so that's their unique author identifier. So you can track and report on the review activity you've done. And as I say, the reports are citable. And so there are some key benefits here, I would say, of this model. It changes the nature of the peer review, so it really helps focus on helping the authors improve their work. Because it's already published, you're not helping an editor decide whether to publish it. It's about supporting and helping those authors. And therefore it makes it a lot more constructive, and many studies have demonstrated this outcome. It also supports discussion and debate, and I think very importantly also highlights there are often different views on an article, and you get to see what those different views are. And as I say, it's also very good training for early career researchers, and the graph really shows the uptake of reviewers deciding to co-author their review with other colleagues, often more junior colleagues, and I think it's a really great thing to see that. It also, by having this model more broadly and having the peer review transparent, it enables fields to move much more quickly, because you get the research out and then you can start to see the viewpoints that are coming on it after that. Because the peer review is post-publication, readers can see all the perspectives on all the articles, not just those on deemed to have passed peer review. I think it builds trust because people can see the level of scrutiny a paper has gone through and who the people are and what they said. It importantly encourages open debate and discussion, and I think that's a really crucial element here. And peer reviewers can be very interesting and important in their own right, and often contain arguments and ideas that can really reveal how thinking in that field is evolving. And so they're often very interesting to read in their own right. And then importantly, reviewers can receive formal credit for what is actually a really important task, often quite time-consuming task. And there are a number of tools that can help really recognise that peer review and track your peer review activity so that you can demonstrate it. We also see a real shift in people's thinking about opening up peer review, and this is from analysis that was published in Nature fairly recently, and demonstrates that actually there's quite a lot of support now, and increasing support actually, for researchers in having that peer review open, having that open discussion, and allowing those comments, etc., to come through. And we see more and more publishers opening up peer review, including Nature, who are opening up a trial for publishing those peer review reports. Another crucial element I touched on was around fair data, which is making the source data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And there are practical challenges for researchers in data sharing, but I think what's really important and crucial here is the recognition by, I think, the vast majority of researchers. You can see in a survey that it's really important that the data is discoverable, and particularly actually a strength of view across Asia, one of the highest out of the world in terms of viewing the importance of sharing that research data. And so many publishers, ourselves included, are developing or have developed data availability statements within the article. You actually list out and cite very clearly the data and where it sits, and also the software and other elements as well. So it's very easy to find and access that data. And then working with many partners to support the visualization of that data within the article. So that you don't have to go off and analyze it somewhere else. You can actually interrogate it within the article itself, and equally you can interrogate software that relates to the data, and we work with many partners like CodeOcean to enable you to do that. And then finally, I just want to talk briefly about some of the partnerships that we've got on gateways and platforms. And so these are essentially publishing hubs. Gateways are hosted on our own platform, on F1000 Research. Platforms are independent publishing platforms, and so have their own citation, depending on the partner that we're working with. But they're customizable hubs to publish a wide range of outputs. And so not only peer-reviewed outputs, which we've been talking about, but also other types of outputs that may not be peer-reviewed, and I'll talk about that in a second. The gateways benefit because they're already within F1000 research. They benefit from the fact we already have indexing with most of the major indexes, and so really provides good visibility for the content that's on there. They support not only institutions but other types of organizations in being able to really customize it and link to their own sites, and indeed list other research outputs listed elsewhere that relate to their organization. They obviously have an advisory board behind them. They can be themed around topics. They can also be used to share virtual conferencing and other types of conference materials, and contain comprehensive content level metrics, again trying to move away from venue level metrics. So I talked about the peer review outputs, but actually there's also the non-peer reviewed content, which is really often forgotten about, but often very important to share. It can be training materials and white papers and technical reports and all sorts of things that are important outputs, but often not citable and often don't have the metrics to go with them. There are key gateway partners just listed here, and as I say, they're often not just institutions but funders, communities, infrastructures, all sorts of types of groups work with us on this, including through our collaboration with Wellcome Trust. We work with the DBT India Alliance to collect publications from that community. And then finally we have the broader funder and institutional controlled platforms. I talked about Open Research Europe earlier, but we also work with Wellcome, the Gates Foundation and many others, where they are their own customized platforms for their grantees. And they really do this to reduce research waste, to enable that much more holistic assessment of researchers' outputs, to reduce costs, because actually it's a much cheaper publication model compared to a lot of open access publication approaches. Simplify the process for researchers so they can spend time doing the research, and really help to support those funders and other organizations in shifting towards more open research and open knowledge practices. And this just gives you a sense of the kind of speed in terms of time to publication and time to peer review, which is much faster than typical publications, and also that demonstrates that a lot of outputs that are published here aren't necessarily traditional research articles. There's a lot of other types that are very important to share. So just to summarize, there's a real growing shift in policies worldwide, both towards open access, but actually, increasingly towards open research. And I think we're kind of getting towards a bit of a tipping point here, particularly with open research. I think all research disciplines should benefit from the same acceleration that we've seen that open research can deliver through the pandemic. And it's really important that we learn from that and really use it as a way to shift the broader system. Tools and technologies exist already to help us rethink how we communicate, and how we accelerate the whole process and bring that transparency and trust. And so I think we need to really think about how we can utilize that. Open peer review and fair data are becoming much more common and much more established, and people are getting much more used to how to do that and the benefits of doing that. And there are major research funders and organisations we now see who are actively supporting and pushing a shift towards more open research publishing models. And that graph on the right kind of shows you that uptick. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and would very much welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence, for very elaborate and very comprehensive talk on open access publishing, open research and open science, and introducing us to F1000 platform, an alternative way of publishing research. We will take the questions at the end of the sessions when all the presentations have been made. Until then, I would like to invite now our next speaker, Mr. Jack McDonald. He is Director of Library Sales at Cambridge University Press, has worked at Cambridge University Press for nearly 10 years, a number of different customer-facing roles and covering a wide range of territories, including the UK, Europe, and Middle East, Africa, India, and Australia. Welcome, Mr. Jack McDonald, and make a presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joan, and also thank you very much, Rebecca, for your excellent presentation, which I enjoyed. I'm just going to get my slides up, and hopefully you're all able to see this now. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to speak to you today, and what I thought I would do is just give you a bit of background on Cambridge University Press and on some of the things that we're doing in open access and open research. It's probably the biggest priority at Cambridge University Press is to deliver change in open research and to support open research globally and to really fundamentally change our business. So it's a hugely important topic for us, and I'll give you an overview of what we're doing and some of our new initiatives in the area. Just to tell you a bit more about Cambridge University Press, we are part of the University of Cambridge. We're a department of the university which is really important in setting our strategy and our priorities as an organisation. We're the oldest publisher in the world. We were founded in 1534, and we've been publishing ever since in Cambridge. But we've expanded hugely since then. We've got 50 offices around the world, and actually the majority of our employees and the vast majority of our customers and readers and authors are outside of the UK as well. We have a significant presence in India. We have a large amount of staff there and a significant number of researchers who contribute to our publications and our authors for our books as well. Within the press, there are three distinct divisions. One is academic publishing, which is the division that I work in, where we publish research books and 400 journals. We also have divisions that manage English language teaching resources and books for primary and secondary students as well in the education division. We obviously have a very long history and are very proud of our authors around the world. And as you can see, we've published a huge number of very high profile authors who've won a number of prizes and Nobel Prizes. And just to give you an idea about some of our really popular digital publications as well, one of them is listed there as the Cambridge Dictionary online. Then we also have Cambridge Core, which is our main content platform for ebooks and journals, which has a huge number of downloads and activities. And then additionally, we've got a number of education platforms for primary and secondary students. So I mentioned that as a department of the university, that really informs our strategy, and this is a really important part of what we do. Is we are a mission-driven organization. As a publisher, we are not for profit. We do make a return on our sales, but all of our surplus or profit is reinvested into our systems and publications and services and within the universities. So we're very different from commercial publishers in that way. We're a very truly global organization. We don't focus particularly on any territories. We do look for the best scholarship all around the world, and we work with universities and customers all around the world as well. And I think what's fundamental to how we work is our commitment to quality. That's something that again distinguishes us from some of our competitors as well. That's something that we try and uphold the quality of our university. Before I go into some of our initiatives and strategies on open access, I just wanted to talk very briefly about some of the activities and offerings we've done during the COVID-19 crisis. One of the things we did, which was early on, we made a large tranche of research and teaching content available free to our library customers during the springtime, which had thousands and thousands of downloads. we've also made all of our publications that relate to the virus and COVID freely available, and that's had nearly 1 million downloads now. We've also really pushed to speed up our publication processes for any articles that relate to the pandemic, and that's been a really good learning experience for us. We've also worked with our authors around the world to put up free resources. So the lockdown lectures, you can see that there's a host of video lectures from our textbook authors which are available to view, and the Cambridge Reflections are a set of blog posts from very distinguished authors all around the world. As well, we've got a lot of other great freely available resources. One on protest, policing, and race, which has obviously been a significant topic in the news and in societies around the world. And we've also published some fantastic new open access books in the past few months as well. One of those is Annie Zaidi's book on memory and homeland in India. It's called Bread, Cement and Cactus. And that's freely available to read on our platform, Cambridge Core. So now I just wanted to tell you some of the initiatives and give you an insight into what we're doing to change our business and to support open research around the world. So our vision in open research is about unlocking the potential of high quality research and working towards a more impactful, community-led, diverse and efficient open future. And this really, I think, is very similar to some of the things from Dr. Lawrence's presentation before about increasing impact, efficiency, and so on. And again, this is tied in with our university, with Cambridge University, and we have a joint position with our university on open research and are pushing to accelerate the pursuit of knowledge through that. So it's a big part of our strategy and our culture as an organization as well. So looking now at specifically what we've been doing, one of the major things is to change our subscription journals business entirely. So we've started recently doing something which we call flipping, which is taking a journal which is supported by subscriptions and is behind a paywall effectively and turning it into a completely open access journal. So we moved 4 of these titles in 2019 and have got many more on the way as well. And I'll talk a bit more about the business models which support that. And we've actually committed to becoming a fully or nearly completely open access journals publisher by 2025. So there's a huge change that's ongoing for us. A second thing we're doing is launching new journals in different subject areas. And as a journals publisher, we've created and launched dozens of journals over the years, but over the past few years and in the future, all of our new journals titles will be open access to start with. I've got some examples of these, like wearable technologies, experimental results, and we're trying to really do some interesting things. We're not trying to just repeat the same kind of journals that already exist. So with experimental results, for example, it's an open access title, and we're encouraging researchers to submit all kinds of results, even failed trials or failed hypotheses or different experiments which others can learn from. And it's a really exciting area. And we are trying to also change our existing journals to increase the uptake of open access. And I'll talk more about how we can do that. And also through partnerships with societies and other organizations. I'm sure you'll hear a lot today about the benefits of publishing open access, and I've highlighted some of these here. I mean, the one that really stands out for me is the availability, the accessibility, and the impact that open access publishing can be. And I was really talking about the change of incentives and so on from the earlier presentation. I think that was a really good point, that authors are really incentivized to publish in high impact journals, and I think over time we will see a really significant impact from open access publishing as the availability means that more people will read it, more people will cite it, and I think that's really fundamental to the whole undertaking. And additionally, open access is a way of maintaining compliance with funder requirements, which is a very important thing around the world, especially in the past couple of years. I thought I'd also just talk through very briefly some of the myths around open access, which still persist. And I've got 5 here, which I'll touch on very briefly. And as was mentioned before, there's still a myth around open access that it equates to low quality publishing. And at Cambridge and at all the other major publishers, open access article book submissions go through the same peer review and publication processes as non-open access submissions. So there really isn't a distinction there for us. The second myth is that open access is too expensive, and there is a point to this. There is a downside to some open access models in that they do shift the funding from institutions over to authors, and there is something that we take really seriously. We don't want to, by creating an open research environment, we don't also want to shut any doors on any researchers. So we do have through some of our business models, which I'll go into in a bit more detail, we are setting up publishing agreements with institutions which will take away that requirement for the author to come up with funding themselves. We're also going through a lot of open access waiver programs in parts of the world where there isn't funding. And the other thing that is really important is that we are a very heavily humanities and social sciences oriented publisher, and so we are really aware of the gap in funding between the humanities subjects and STM, and so any open access feature, any open access business model that we consider, we are always bearing in mind that we need to make sure that we can make it sustainable for researchers working in those areas as well. There's another myth that there's no benefit to authors, but really there, as I was saying before, there really is a significant impact in discoverability, usage, citations, and just impact, just the idea of making sure that your content, there's no barrier to people reading your article, for example. And there is a concern, or there are some myths about authors giving up their IP, their intellectual property. And as we mentioned before, there are a host of different licenses for authors to keep control of their intellectual property. So we do, wherever we can, we try to give our authors a choice about specifically what type of license they can use. And there is a kind of myth that because as an author you might be paying for an article to be published, that there will be an increased rate of acceptance, or there's some kind of feeling that because you're paying for it that there's a less there's a shadier side to all of this. And it's true, there are some predatory journals still out there, actually thousands of predatory journals that are out there that do request payment up front. But what's really important, and this is true of our journals and at many of the major, most all of the major journals publishers, that any payment is dependent on peer review and acceptance. It shouldn't be the other way around. So I mentioned some of our business models, and I wanted to give you an insight into our primary business model to support open research at universities around the world, and also give you an insight into how it's changing for our business as well. And our main business model for all of this is called Read and Publish. You might hear of transformative agreements. and this has been really important for us, and I'll give you an overview of how they work and what we've been doing. So one of the major issues with transforming an existing publishing business into an open access publishing business is making it sustainable for everyone. So on the one hand, publishers still need revenue in order to support and invest in publishing. On the other hand, there is a limited amount of funding out there. We as publishers, we can't expect institutions and authors to continually increase their expenditure with us in order to support publishing. So in order to try and address that kind of crunch point, we have a sales model which is read and publish, and it's not something that's unique to Cambridge, although we have done quite a lot of these deals around the world. So it's one that really is a big shift away from the traditional sales model for journals. So the traditional sales model for journals is that libraries will pay for subscription access, and that's the end of it effectively. If an author wants to publish open access, they have to pay an APC. But what the read and publish model means is that we can transform the existing spend on journal subscriptions and actually begin to include publishing rights as well. So hence the read and publish. So if a university is already spending a significant amount with us on journal subscriptions, we're actually pushing now to include publishing rights, which means that on the one hand, university still has access to all of the journals in their collection, but on the other hand, any authors who are affiliated with that institution, who are doing research as part of that institution, are eligible to publish open access without any additional charge. So it's kind of merging these two streams of spending, and it means that it can take away that barrier for a researcher who doesn't necessarily have the ability to find that APC money. It means that we can use the existing subscription revenue, which is significant around the world, and use that to drive open access. And also we see this as a sustainable way to actually make that transformation into open access publishing happening. That we don't see there's going to be an additional huge amount of funding to do this. So it does make it possible. And again, going back to what I said about humanities and social sciences, where there isn't as much funding available, that's critical in those areas. And this is what it means in money terms for Cambridge, really. So in the past, the vast majority of our revenue came from selling collections of journal subscriptions, and a very small amount of money came from APC revenue and open access. And now what we see is we're actually shifting that through these transformative deals, so that the collection, the amount of revenue we get from collections is actually decreasing. And we're changing that into open access revenue or publishing revenue. So we don't really foresee the overall pie increasing in size, but it does mean that universities get the added benefit of publishing rights for their authors. So it's a really big change for us, and it will take some time, but we have set the goal of 2025 by turning all of our journals into open access titles. So we have seen a really rapid growth in read and publish agreements around the world. This all started, for us at least, about 3 years ago when we did our first read and publish deal, but it has really increased in scale and in size. So it's really our primary journal sales model now. We've got a number of, the highest concentration of deals is in Europe, but we're also seeing growth and interest in North America, in China, and we have several agreements up and running in India as well. So we see this as a truly global phenomenon, and it does need to be a global phenomenon as well, because it won't really work for us, and it won't really work for researchers if parts of the world embrace open access and parts of the world do not. So again, just to recap some of the benefits about read and publish and the sales model. So just to highlight again that we think it's a sustainable model. It does convert. It does move publishing at institutions from behind a paywall to open access, but it doesn't necessarily increase any of the expenditure. And I do think it's a good way, particularly in subjects that do not have additional funding. It does mean that authors can meet those funding requirements and increase the impact of their publishing. So I wanted to move on to a slightly different open access initiative as well, which is called Cambridge Open Engage. And it's a new platform for early research. So it's somewhat similar to a preprint server, and we launched this last year and have seen some really interesting uptake as well. And it does mean that researchers can collaborate with peers. They can discover research as it's happening, and for authors, it really means that they can get their research out very quickly and very earlier. Talking to researchers last year, there's a quote that always sticks with me that that a researcher I was talking to said, if I want to publish and get credit for my work, I'll publish in a journal. If I want to get the message out quickly to the community, I'll go to a preprint server. And this is effectively what this platform is doing. And it's also about analysis and getting information about different topics. So as a researcher or an author, you might get some analytics about your own work and understand what the audience is for an area. But also this platform could be useful for funders, for universities to understand how much research is happening at their institution and get analytics on that, and to add value to faculty and so on. So just to give you an idea about what this looks like, this particular article on Cambridge Open Engage is a working paper by some Japanese researchers on the COVID virus, and as you can see, it's really taken off. You can track the metrics of it, see different versions of it, and if these articles go on to be published into journals, it's all contained in the metadata here, so you can see the version of record as well. And then finally, I wanted to talk about Cambridge Core Share, which is another initiative that we've undertaken. And it's really just to support researchers who want to share either their own articles or other articles that they find interesting. And it's been a controversial area within academic publishers, because obviously, we have to protect the content and the IP that we publish, but we also have a mission to support. Scholarly activities, and sharing of content has been going on since the dawn of publishing and scholarly activity. So it's something we do want to support. So the way that Cambridge Core Share works is that researchers can find a journal article on our platform, Cambridge Core, and if they have access to that through their library, in most cases, they can share a link, and it sends a shareable PDF to social networks or scholarly sharing sites, or through email. And anyone they share this link with can download a read-only article to see that. So one of the use cases we had in mind was really when an author of an article sees their article published, they can then share it with their immediate community and the people they worked on it with. And it's been really successful. We've had a year of this service, and almost all of our journals use this service, and we've had a significant amount of uptake, and you can see the types of platforms that have been used on this, and nearly 500,000 links. So we are investigating expanding this into books and chapters and other areas. So it's something we want to do to continue to support this. And then finally, I just thought I'd mention some of the other areas of support we have. On our website, we do have open access guides. We can do workshops, either virtual or hopefully in the future on site as well. And I just wanted to invite you to contact our team based in Delhi. And we've got some links here on how to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you more. So that was just a brief overview of some of our initiatives in open access, and look forward to questions and discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jack McDonald, for very informative talk on Cambridge Open Access platforms, read and publish, and Open Engage platforms, and Cambridge Core Share. So all the three are very useful for authors. We will take some questions, on this at the end of the session. So finally, I would like to invite Mr. Amir Kahana, who is Account Manager for Asia, Knowledge Unleashed in Germany. Mr. Amir Kahana has studied in Israel, Germany, and Taiwan. He holds a master's degree in Chinese studies from Free University of Berlin. After working for 8 years in university libraries, he joined Knowledge Unleashed as account manager for the region of Asia. Together with KU team, he is working on the development of promotion of sustainable model of open access for him, promoting the access to high quality academic knowledge around the world in an essential task in the battle against the rise of fake news and alternative truth. So this should be a very interesting topic on sustainable model for publishing, open access publishing. He's a very unique funding mechanism for open access. So Mr. Kahana, all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chauhan, for the introduction. And I would like also to thank the organizer and the two speakers for their inspiring and informative papers, the presentations they just showed. And yeah, I'm really honored and thankful to be invited and to have the opportunity to present to you Knowledge Unleashed and the innovative funding model. So I would like now to share my presentation, and I do hope that it will work. Okay, so I hope everybody now can see it.
It's not visible.
Okay.
Can you select the right? Yeah, can you select the right screen? There must be multiple screens.
It worked before.
Yeah.
Okay, is it visible right now?
Still not visible.
Okay. We had this problem in the before, and it was fixed. So I'm not sure what. Okay. I can email it to you, and
are you able to see your presentation on your Windows somewhere? If you click on share screen.
I do see it.
Yeah, just click on the particular window where your PPT is visible. I think then it will share.
Like that, it's is visible?
Not yet, not yet.
Not yet.
Blank screen
Okay,
coming.
I'll just send it to you quickly. One second. Meanwhile, I can try to send. I'm really sorry for that.
There seems to be a problem with your bandwidth, you know, looks like.
My bandwidth. Okay. Okay.
In that case,
Send
just
it to
mail.
you.
Yeah, probably that should work. In the meantime, you can start talking about your model.
Yeah, I
And
can
we'll try to
start. Let me know when you got the email when the
yes, yeah.
with the. Okay. Yeah. So just a bit of the structure of my presentation. I would first to give you a bit background, what is knowledge unlatched and how it works in general, how it is established, and so on. Then I will go for the special funding operation models, show you 3 of our models that I think are really representative for of our the QU operation models. QU is knowledge unlatched. And then I'll move on to show you what we have in QU achieved so far. And of course, I will touch upon the benefits for libraries, for authors, and for the users. At the end, I'll show you some usage analysis of our titles to show you the impact of the knowledge unlatched and our funding model. So, yeah, is it already?
I've got your PowerPoint
there?
presentation. Can I
Yeah, please share the screen.
present it from here? Yeah, I'll just move it. Just
Okay. So I can move on and tell you about.
yeah,
the
it is there already. I think it is okay. Was it my okay? Just a moment. I'll share my screen. Okay. Visible now to everyone.
So your screen is not, the presentation is not visible. Now it is visible.
Okay, now.
Yeah.
What is visible?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a moment. Is it okay now?
Yeah, if you.
So can you please put it in the presentation
Yes,
mode?
I'm doing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, if you could move to the 3rd slide, please. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what is knowledge unlatched? It's the background. So it's an organization or initiative. It was established in 2012 by Frances Pinter. Back then, she was the manager of Manchester University Press, and the idea was to develop a funding model for open access which meets the needs of humanity and social sciences. As Mr. McDonald mentioned shortly, the humanities and social science are a bit different in their institution policies and funding than the STEM or STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So the special needs are mainly that the APC or BPC models are not so much comply with funding policies of academic institutions in those fields, and also that, well, we talk mostly about APC, about journals, and most of the output in the HSS, in the humanities and social sciences, is in book form. So the decision was, or the idea was, to break off from the, so to say, normal open access model of APC or BPC, and to go toward collaborative institutional funding model. So in this model, library works together and finance the publication of open access books. Or in other words, how it works, each library contributes a small share of the all amount in order to convert, to change, or to flip a toll-based title or more packages of title into open access title. Since this 2012, or actually the pilot round was 2013, and it was really successful. We've grown and expanded our horizon and models. We are not only focused on HSS, also on the STEM, and we have a bit journals. And the idea is, the speakers before me and also Professor Rajkumar mentioned the idea of sustainable open access. So we would like also to develop through a model, a sustainable model of open access. That's why we expand the horizon, expand our models, and to be able to promote it more or better. So one thing is important, which comes always. We are a crowdfunding model, and we use the word pledge, like a library pledge for a collection. But it's when we use these terms, it sounds a bit like a donation, but I would like to emphasize it's not a donation. We're talking about libraries or institutions pay money, they pay fees, and get for it a product. The product is, of course, open access, but it is, so to say, an alternative acquisition model in my view, or the view of Knowledge Unlatched. And I know that libraries around the world already see it as such, and they take our brochure and look at it and decide to acquire the content. Okay, if you could move to the next slide, please. So what are we? You can see the team, it's a very small team. We are sort of a startup organization. We are based in Berlin, Germany, but we are pretty international. People are based in many places around the world, mainly North America, some places in Europe and Asia. And I think we all have a vocation or idealistic or ideals that move us, is the vision to promote this sustainable open access. And we also believe that through cooperation with libraries, we can achieve that goal. Could you move it to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, that's our marketplace for open access. I mentioned earlier that KU has grown and introduced new models. So we have now many products. You can see them, and we see it as a marketplace for open access. I would like to focus in detail in this presentation on three representative models. First of all is the KU Select. KU Select is the original model that started in the pilot, and it's also our core model. And I think more than half of our titles were published or financed through these models. The other two models is the transformative models with our partner publishers, usually with guaranteed access for libraries. And the last one is a really new model, the subscribe to open. It touches us regarding journals. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So as I said, KU Select is our core collection. What is really important and maybe the basic idea with the model about also KU is about choosing the content of the open access of our collection. And in these models, it shows well that libraries are the one who decide what they would have as open access. And library decides what content will be in this collection. So how does it work? It has a few phases, 7 phases. It starts when publishers submit to us a title list that they would like to publish with us as open access. Then it goes to the libraries or the KU selection committee. This committee is, the committee members are all academic librarians, and we invite each year librarians to participate and be member of this selection committee. The selection committee reviews all of the titles. Is usually around more than 1,000 different titles. Most of them front list, but we have also backlist. So we differentiate between front list and backlist titles. Anyway, the selection committee vote for titles if they would like to see it. Each member votes if they would like to see it in the collection or not. So after the committee review all the titles, we can present the collection. The collection is this year of Humanities and Social Science book is made of 343 titles that was chosen by the selection committee. So we present in this phase this collection to the libraries. In that phase, libraries can decide to invest and fund and help us to publish it open access. After we receive the funding at the end of the year for the KU Select, we can notify the publisher. They give us the publication, then we can upload it to the platform where they are open access. Of course, the publishers receive title fees for their for each title, and the books are what we call unlatched, are made available open access on our platforms. Of course, it can every platform can also, as the nature of open access, every platform can ingest the content and publish it as open access everywhere. Okay, the next slide, please. Thank you. The model of the transformative models with our partners, the partner publishers, is a bit newer. The idea is to publish the complete front-list portfolio in one subject of one publisher, and to flip it all to open access. So, for example, we have this year the partner with we have this year a lot of collections with partner publishers, but one example is with Brill Press, on the subject of postmodern literature. So the aim is to publish the whole frontlist collection of next year of Brill Press in the subject of postmodern literature, which includes 20 titles as open access. And that we need, of course, the funding of the institutions. But in this model, we have a special offer for the libraries. It's the guaranteed access. In the case that we didn't achieve the goal and all the funding for the whole collection, we could then only enlarge, make available open access only part of the collection. Libraries who support or invest money in this collection, however, receive guarantees that they would get access to all of the collection. So either the titles we have enlarged, so the open access, so available for everyone, or through, and the rest of the title would be accessible for the library through the closed access through the online platform of, in this case, Brill Press. Okay, next slide, please. So we have a really new model now. It's the subscribe to open model, S2O, and it's to show you how new it is. And the pilot project, the first pilot project was last year with the Berghahn Press, Berghahn Open Anthropology journals, and it was very, very successful. The idea behind that is pretty simple. The funding for that comes from subscription, like normally in journals, but goes to fund the in the end to open access that would be accessible for everyone in the world. So the funding comes from existing subscriptions that already there, but also we try to upgrade, to get upgrades for the full packages. For example, if a library is subscribed only for 5, so we try to upgrade the for the whole package and then to get more funding for the open access, and of course new subscription. When the goal reached, we can, together with of course the publisher, we can publish open access, the journals as open access without any APC. It's a, well, so to say, gold open access, but without APC for the authors. So, as I said, we had the last year the successful pilot project with Berghahn Open Anthropology. So the 13 journals are available now for the volume of 3 years, are available open access now. We are now we launched, they introduced the also this model with other presses, with other publishers, like Ploto Press, where we will publish as open access 21 journals, the whole package of Ploto open journals. And today we have also launched, it's quite new, so I didn't mention here in the slide, but we have launched also a project of Subscribe to Open with the International Association of International Water Association. Next slide, please. So go now for our achievement, what we've achieved so far in the last 7 years of KU. So first of all, number of libraries that participated in one of more of our models are now more of 600. The publishers are now more than 100 publishers, and I'm talking about, of course, academic publishers, but we try to be to focus on the diversity of our publishers, to include many publishers, small, large, mediums, commercial, non-commercial, university presses, society presses. So it would guarantee the diversity of the open access content that we unleashed. So about the content, so right now there are more than 2,000 books that are available open access through our funding, and thanks to the libraries, of course. And we unleashed each day and each week new titles. The journals, of course, we focus mainly on books, but we unleashed now more than 30 journals that are APC-free open access journals. And about our usage, the usage increased the whole time. I will come to it later with the usage statistic, but our interactions, usage interaction are now more than 8.5 million. Next slide, please. So this slide, of course, is only to give you a more concrete idea with whom we are working, what the sum of a publisher. Of course, I couldn't show all the 100 publisher and all the 600 libraries we work with, or we are still working with, but just to give you an idea of the publishers and libraries we work with. So next slide, please. We publish every year at the beginning of the year our poster of the Open Access Heroes to show the top number of participation and interaction of the previous year. Here you see, of course, the numbers for 2019. The important numbers I would like to draw your attention to is, first of all, at the left corner, at the left top corner, the supporting institutions. As you can see, our main base of support is in North America and followed by the Western, Central, and Northern Europe. We are trying to promote also our models in, well, of course, Australia and New Zealand, which is quite a small market, but they also a big support for us. But we try and we promote also our models, financial model in Asia, and more recently in South America and also Africa. And of course, hoping that we get more funding and could expand our models even more. So about the benefits of our model, first of all, I would come, first of all, for the authors and for the users, is for user it's pretty clear that a user get access to academic and qualitative content. Our models assure the quality of the content as well as the access. For the author, of course, as Mr. McDonald already said in his presentation, authors get greater impact with open access, but in our model, they enjoy all of the benefits, but without having to pay either APC or BPC. And now I come to the libraries. What the benefits for the libraries? First of all, if we look at about the acquisition, the library purchased titles in our model, the price of each title tend to be, or in average, is lower than the library would pay for a license for an ebook in the traditional acquisition model. So a library can also save money in our model. Of course, we switch the open access, the role of who decide about open access to the libraries. So libraries can be active and shape together with us and the publisher the open access landscape worldwide, and thus strengthen the role as what I like to see as I was to be a librarian, as a goalkeeper of knowledge. So I see in that big importance of library participation. So next slide, please. Thank you. Now I'll go a bit to the usage statistic. So we at KU, we monitor and report on the usage statistic of the titles we unlatched. It means that we in KU, but also our supporting institution, can evaluate the impact of the model, the impact of the titles that were unlatched. The usage data that we can use comes exclusively from the 4 platforms to which we upload directly our titles. And that is JSTOR, Project Muse, OAPEN, and the newly launched Open Research Library that's our own open access platform. In order to be able to combine all the data from all of the 4 platforms, which has different metrics and different raw data, we use the one term or one usage report of interaction, which include book download, chapter view, investigation. So so each activity with our title is being counted as interaction. So I just want to mention one thing about this about usage data. Of course, the nature of open access is that everyone can host it everywhere. So there are, in this case, lots of usage data that get, so to say, lost. So we can't cover all of the usage data. So let's move to the usage analysis. Thank you. So here we can see the overall usage from January 2018 and until recently from to March 2020. I used the unconventional time to push it a bit to 2020 to show you maybe the effect of the COVID-19 crisis, the pandemic crisis, and the lockdown. And it's still too early, in my opinion, to evaluate or to have a valid assertion about the effect of COVID-19 of our usage. But it is nice to see a sort of idea about the usage also in the beginning of 2020. So as you can see in this graph, that our usage is increasing all the time. There's a tendency, of course, with some peaks, but it generally increases more and more. And I don't have here the graph, the data from 2017, but it is even more clearly how a large increase we are experiencing. Okay, but it's not only about the, of course, with more and more titles, the usage increases, of course, the overall usage. But as we can see in this chart, the usage, if we can see the average interaction per title, so we have experiencing every year, each year, almost a double usage of each title, averagely, of course. So it's not only about the amount of titles, so the usage objectively for each title averagely increases. And the reason of that is, of course, with more and more titles, the visibility of other titles is increased, but also more people or more users are familiar with it, and the better indexing, we are promoting the indexing of our titles, and that brings, of course, with it a usage increase and visibility to the old titles. The last charts of about the usage data that I would like to show you, the next slide, please, is the usage analysis according to continents, to show you how the development is different regionally. So here we can see, of course, it's here the different continents, the same time period from the beginning of 2018 till March 2020. And as we can see, the most of our usage comes from the USA, not only the USA, North America in general. And it's of course not surprising, since as I show you before with the hero posters, most of our supporters come from North America. And of course, we see usage increase in total in North America, especially comparing to 2018. Of course, other regions follow suit. As we can see, Europe, our second important base, is increasing, and recently this year there is a really large increase. And of course, what really nice to see that the increase in Asia, which is the usage was till now relatively medium, but at the beginning of the year we experienced really great increase in the usage in Asia. Other regions are also, well, as we can see, there's also a bit of increase. The total numbers, though, are a bit low. In Oceania, it's mainly Australia, New Zealand. We are not talking about a big region, so it's relatively, we're talking relatively on high numbers if you think about the population, but we still have work to be done in case of usage in Africa and mainly South America. The main difficulties in South America, I would say, is that most of our content, especially the Q Select, is in English. And in South America, the main language in university and academic institution is Spanish and Portuguese. So we are trying also to expand the horizon also to other languages, and of course among them is as far as Spanish and Portuguese. Okay, the last slide is only a quick summary of what I show you. Well, what is KU as an initiative of collaborative funding model for open access. In this model, libraries are a key factor. They collaborate together with us and the publisher to fund the publication of open access titles. We have various models like the KU Select, transformative model with partner publishers, the subscribe to open model, and we have of course other models that due to time limits I didn't present it, but they also exist. And very important is the expansions, not only of the content that we expand the content in terms of quantity, but also the diversity for the disciplines and books and journals. And of course, the usage increases worldwide, and of course not in the same pace in every region of the world, but we see that what makes me as responsible, of course, for the Asian region, what makes me happy that the usage in Asia increases in the last time alone. And yeah, that was from my side, and I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And of course, I assume you have questions, and I would be really happy to answer. And of course, I would be really happy to share with all the attendees the presentation, the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amir Kahana, for presenting this library-centric collaborative funding model for open access publishing. We have a few questions, and probably would like to take one by one. So the first question, I think it is for Dr. Lawrence. What are your views on open access publishing as per India, South Asia is concerned? What are Taylor and Francis initiatives for more publications from the region, especially in least funded areas like HSS?
Thank you. Yes, and it's a very good question, and it's a challenging question. I mean, Taylor and Francis, like other publishers, are working on, for example, read and publish deals, as Jack McDonald explained earlier, which is trying to look at really transforming the funding that's gone into subscriptions and moving it over into open access publication. And so, of course, part of thinking about how we can do that, but also one of the reasons we were acquired by Taylor and Francis as F1000 was because I think Taylor and Francis really see the future and direction as open research publishing, and which, as I talked about earlier, is a significantly cheaper approach actually in terms of open access costs, because you take out a lot of the duplication in the system. You're not going from journal to journal to journal trying to get the article published. You just get it out there once, you peer review it once, and it's out there and it's visible. And so the analysis that I mentioned earlier that Wellcome have done, for example, looking at the costs for them, show that they've seen a 67% reduction, so about 2/3 reduction in what they pay for publications on the platform that they have with us versus what they pay elsewhere in terms of open access funds. And of course, that's still a chunk of money, and I recognize that can be really challenging, and particularly as the questioner asked in humanities and social sciences. And that's where I think we need to work particularly with governments and funders and also private institutions and others to think about, well, how can we cover that? Because fundamentally, of course, if you're doing the research and funding the research, it's crucial that we communicate that research and get it out there. And there are some costs involved somewhere, and we just need to work out how we balance and maybe reposition what's going into subscriptions and reposition that into enabling everybody to access through open access.
Just to add to these questions about F1000 model, you mentioned that it's being indexed by major indexing services, Scopus or Web of Science or something like that. How it is done basically? It's the collection level, or how it is being cited, and how will we in those since it may not be a traditional journal citation, so just can you elaborate on that?
Of course, yes. So each platform, so F1000 Research or Welcome Open Research, etc., are treated by those indexes like a journal. So the citation will either be F1000 Research or will be the funder or organizational's platform. And they have all agreed to index articles once they pass peer review. So essentially 2 reviewers have to say, yes, this is approved, or one says, yes, it's approved, and one says, it's approved, reservations, but I'm largely happy with it. And at that point, they index that content. And then as the new versions come in, they also then index, and update the versions. But in terms of the citation, it's the same as you would expect on any publication.
Does that mean that if you transform a particular existing journal, will we be able to keep that citation of that particular journal once you sort of transform on the platform?
Yes, so there's 2 different approaches. You can either transform it and it has its own platform, like Welcome Open Research, but it's called whatever the name of the journal is, and there's no reason not to change the name of that journal. And potentially, there's no reason to lose existing indexing within there. We'd have to talk with the indexers if the publication model was changing, but there's no reason why necessarily that should change the indexing. The alternative approach is to actually create a space, a gateway, as I mentioned, on F1000 Research itself, which would then mean it would get the F1000 Research citation, but would definitely immediately benefit from the indexing that we already have agreed.
Thank you. Next question is again to you. This is a general question on open access. As you know, China, US, and India accounts for 42% of global scientific publications. And how is the response, to the open access movement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think all 3 major global powers are really looking at open science. I mean, you see, the US, I talked about this big consultation they've been doing around open science, and they're looking very carefully at their policies. They've had open data policies for quite some time now, and obviously open access policies. They were one of the first to really have quite strong open access policies. But they are looking much more broadly to look at expanding those policies towards all aspects of open science. And equally China, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, for example, have preprint servers. They're looking at open data policies. They're looking at how to adjust the evaluation system. There have been recent announcements in terms of thinking about how to really transition away from using venue publication as a metric and how to really shift towards open science. And indeed, I see in India as well, the real changes in trying to shift towards open access, particularly, but also, I'd encourage say towards some of the other key pillars around open science that I think are so crucial to scholarly publication. But I think the challenge and one of the things that we're all working to try and do is to try and have some elements of consistency between these policies, because otherwise researchers really do get caught in the middle. It becomes incredibly difficult to make sure you're adhering to all the different policies with all their different nuances. So the more that those parties particularly, but also just globally, work together on this and think about solutions, the better for everybody.
Thank you. Next question is to Mr. Jack McDonald about the question is there any cap in publication for read and publish in Cambridge University Press? How many articles can a researcher publish if the library is subscribed to Cambridge Journals, is it free? What is the discount available? What will be the publication time? Let me add another questions which is not related to the price or cost, but this is about your platform Cambridge Open Engage. How is it different than the Open Archives, like ResearchGate, it's different than it?
Well, there's quite a few questions there. I suppose this question about is there a cap that in that context, so that means is there a limit on how many articles we will accept as part of a read and publish deal? I would say, our preference is to not have any cap, and because it's a very difficult thing for any institution to have a limit to how they can publish it. It kind of goes against the whole idea of the transformative deal to put a limit on there. So I guess my answer would be that if we can make it work, we don't have a cap on any of our read and publish deals, and I think in almost all cases that's true. In terms of how many articles can a researcher publish, that doesn't actually change with this business model. I think I suppose one way of looking at it is saying, just because a library, a university subscribes, or a university is part of read and publish deal, it doesn't mean that we will accept more articles from researchers based in that institution. There isn't necessarily a change to that. So that doesn't really have much impact. Is it free? I mean, yes, it would be free for the researchers. So if there's a read and publish deal that's active and the researcher is eligible, then there's no cost for them. They can, and they choose to publish open access, there's no cost. And in terms of publication time, it really depends hugely on the journal and the type of article and so on. I mean, I mentioned earlier we've been pushing through articles related to COVID very, very quickly, but it depends a lot on the peer review time and all the other sides of publications. So it really depends a huge amount on the journal itself, but it can be as short as a few weeks and maybe as long as a few months, I suppose. And the final question about Cambridge Open Engage and how it is different from an open archive. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in terms of what it's trying to do. It's trying to get early research out to the communities. Some of those open archives are very subject specific. This one's actually a bit broader in terms of what it has. And I suppose it's, I would say, one thing that has a bit different is that it has a publisher behind it, I suppose, so that it has, there might be some things that we can add to it that because of our background as a publisher it's a bit different, but there are a lot of similarities in terms of objectives.
Thank you. The last question is to Mr. Amir Kahana. Are the journals peer reviewed in KU? So let me add another question. When I was looking at the usage statistics, the charts that you presented, obviously the Asia is somewhere on the third spot, or maybe other regions might be lower than that. Would you be considering, differential pricing or the commitments, for different regions in that case, because the usage is really, there's a lot of difference in the gap among the uses.
Okay, I'll start. First of all, thank you for the questions, and of course, thank you. The question of the quality of the peer review is very important, and I'm really glad it came up, because it's really important for me to stress that KU, of course, focus. It's really important for us the quality of our content, and of course, not only our journals but also all the titles of the books are peer reviewed. That's minimum standard of being accepted to KU from the publisher side, and of course we are in communication with libraries, so libraries give us feedback what they want to see and if they are not happy with the content, so we know, and we wouldn't work with a publisher that libraries don't want to see. And yeah, as you saw, also the name of the publishers are all well-established publishers and credible publishers. So yeah, well, long answer for a short question. Yes, everything is peer-reviewed. And well, could you repeat the question? Is
the differential pricing you see for the regions, where your usage is not that impressive, particularly Asia,
well, we don't have different prices right now, but there is, we considered options, for example, for libraries to pledge or to support us as a consortium, and then to get better prices, so a reduction. Yes, it's also possible for libraries now to support only part of the collection, but in the end we have our goal. We need to achieve a certain goal of funding in order to be able to unlatch the different titles. So the more library participated, the more we can afford to have reduction. Yeah, generally. Yes, but specifically we have to check it each case concretely.
Thank you. So there are no more questions now, and so I would like to thank all the speakers for their valuable time and very informative, useful sessions. I would also like to thank all the participants for their patience and staying for all these 2 hours, more than 2 hours, and also thank you the staff at their India offices for Cambridge University Press and Taylor & Francis, Pankaj Bharadwaj and his team, and Ajay and his team for arranging these talks by the speakers. Thank you so much, everybody, including my colleagues, Ritu, and other people who helped me in organizing this webinar. So we come to a conclusion of this webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in.